Good evening, everybody. What's your name?
My name is Arya.
Arya just asked a question. Maybe you'll ask the question again, Arya.
Yeah, when you were beginning your journey and just getting into Judaism, what was the biggest obstacle you faced when connecting to the text and just higher spirituality?
The question was, in case the mic didn't pick it up, when I was starting my quest for spirituality, Judaism, what was the biggest test that I faced trying to move up and becoming more spiritual? More or less, that's what you said, yeah? I mean, I think, every Baal Tshuva, there's a joke, they say every Baal Tshuva wakes up one day to find himself from birth. Meaning all of the problems that someone who's born religious is familiar with, doing things by rote, mitzvahs, anoshim, elamuda, the difficulty in finding constant inspiration and moving up, as a Jew should try and do, could be also as expected to do. So every Baal Tshuva really doesn't have that disadvantage, because when a person becomes religious, obviously he becomes religious, I think most people, and maybe not everybody, but certainly in my own case, with a lot of enthusiasm. A lot of enthusiasm, everything is exciting, everything is wonderful, everything is new, everything is... And of course, speaking personally, I think one of the reasons is that somebody who comes from a secular background has probably been exposed to many things which have repelled him and have caused him or helped him to seek something. I think when I looked around and I saw, before I was religious, I looked at my friends' relationships, their marriages. I said to myself, that's not what I want. I remember one day going to see this very arty movie, which everybody said was, and I just came out feeling like I wanted to have a shower. It just was so feeling of like being almost violated, of attacked, of intellectually and emotionally. I don't know, but many Baalei Tshuva, speaking for myself here, are so repulsed by the secular world and its lack of values. It's difficult to believe that's what Hashem created the world for. And even if a person isn't naturally a very strong believer in God per se, he must look at the world and think this is the best that humankind can do. So I think anybody who has an aspiration, who has a feeling that my life is more significant than just getting the next cheap thrill and waking up the next morning with a very bad taste in my mouth, feeling of being let down and of being soiled. So I think, when a person becomes, a lot of people, I don't know how many, I don't know numbers, but I can only speak for myself. That was one of the major things that propelled me to look more closely at my Judaism, was this feeling that there had to be more. That's not what life was about, and set me on a search. And of course, the more I saw of Judaism, the more I saw of Shabbos, of the mitzvahs, of the family life, of the respect, of the intellectual honesty, so the more attractive it became. I think I'm speaking about, not just myself here. However, every Baal Tshuva is also faced, even though his previous life is definitely a strong propellant to propel him away from all of that which is impure. There's a concept which is once a person is toim tam chet, he's tasted sin. He has the taste in his mouth. And he has this sort of maybe schizophrenic, schizophrenic is a very strong word, a dual valence, a duality in him. On the one hand, he's repelled by it, but on the other hand, there's something in the back of his mind that in a sense means that he is in some way on a deep level, because it's part of him. A person can never fully trust himself. Al tamin ba'atzmacha ad yom moscha. The Mishnah says, don't trust yourself until the day you die. Until the day you die, you have always got to constantly be mechazik, constantly strengthen yourself, constantly find ways of, because the fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, you saw certain things, you heard certain things, you ate certain things, you experienced certain things, and those things, kiva shetoim tam chet. So a Baal Tshuva, as always, has to be aware of that, and on the one hand, of course, take the inspiration of that rejection of all of that fake world and its fake ideals, if you can call them ideals, its base lusts, its duplicity. And intellectually he can realize that, and he does realize that, because otherwise why would he become religious? But on the other hand, he has to understand that at another level he has baggage. And of course, these things fade, and they fade, and they fade, and they fade. But a Baal Tshuva, I think, always has to be aware that he has a past. And that past will get more and more into the past. But it'll never be quite the same as somebody who has never ever stepped over that line. Because somebody who's never stepped over that line is very clear to him. For him to step over that line will require a much more strong conscious decision and rebellion than someone who's already been there. There's always that danger, and I think a Baal Tshuva always has to have that awareness that he has to be constantly on his guard and not put himself in situations and be mechazik constantly. We're talking about Balei Tshuva, so I finished last week's shir. Last week's shir was called Elul and the Two Light Bulb Jokes. Well, the first of those light bulb jokes, which we said last week, was how many West Coast psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is only one, but the light bulb has really got to want to change. The second of those jokes, and we talked last week about change, how change is very difficult because we all believe we're good people, and if I'm a good people, so I do good things, so it's difficult for a person to really be honest and see that he does need to change. The second of the jokes is how many Balei Tshuva does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, are we allowed to do that? A Baal Tshuva, and I can make fun of myself, tends to, can be very super, aware. There's another Baal Tshuva joke that goes, one Baal Tshuva asked the other Baal Tshuva, it's Hanukkah, says, which candle do we light tonight? So the other one says, yesterday it was 3. Okay. So it's true, Balei Tshuva tend to be super zealous, but as I said, we said at the beginning, there's a day that you wake up to find that you kind of become less enthusiastic. And really that's the subject of what I wanted to speak to about. It's really about how do you become close to God, to Hashem, and how do you stay close to Hashem? Which is really what it's all about. And we're at the time of year now, the time of Elul, the time of Tshuva, the time of trying to come close to God, to Hashem. And as I said, after that original enthusiasm wears off, whether it takes a year or 2 years or 5 or 10 years, there will come a moment where, however enthusiastically you started, if you just leave it, it'll wind down like a clockwork clock. So we spoke last week, I'm not going to go over it again, about one approach to tshuva, which is to analyze what you've been doing wrong, which is one way to do it, and to make a kabbalot, acceptances, how do you say in English, kabbalot, resolutions about the things you're going to change. My experience is that usually they don't stick. And the more you make, the less you keep. Maybe if you start with one very small thing, I suggested last week, maybe every week, on Sunday you'll take a siddur and bench from it. Something like that which is quantifiable and small, that could work. What I want to speak to tonight is about a whole different other way. A whole different other way of approaching Elul. Now this is something which is not easy to do. Few people can really achieve it, and it needs continual work, but it really can change you. And even if it doesn't change you completely, even if you don't turn into a complete tzaddik, I know that this way actually does work. In other words, the basic idea of this concept is to realize, to internalize, and to constantly remind myself that I am not living in my world, I'm living in Hashem's world. This is Hashem's world. The nature of a person is he believes that he's the center of the universe. Descartes said famously, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. The nature of a person, because his whole perception starts from himself outward, is to see himself as the center of the world. And even though intellectually he can understand that there are other people in the world, but we tend to be very egocentric, not just in terms of selfishness, of course that's a product of it, but we see ourselves as everything goes on around me, that, I essentially all I can be totally sure of is the fact that I exist. I don't know, maybe all of you guys are just this huge IMAX presentation, and the thing that I'm most certain of is the fact that I exist. And because that's the case, a person tends to see himself as the center of the world, and he has to make an effort to see himself as none other than just one more aspect of Hashem revealing himself in his world. And that's why we say twice a day, Krishma, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Because the natural default position is to think, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, sure there's a God, but Ani Echad. I'm the center of existence. So what a person can do is to think, to repeat to himself, I'm living with Hashem. I'm living in Hashem's world. And since I'm living with Him, I want to do what He wants me to do. This is a completely different way of approaching Elul. It's not a question of making lists of things that we did wrong, things that need fixing. And I'm not saying one shouldn't do that. But that is essentially working on from the outside in. The other way, the more effective way, the more difficult way is to work from the inside out, which is to start off with a completely different worldview, where I am with Hashem. It says in the end of Makos, Chavakuk, the prophet, founded the whole Torah on one principle. He boiled it all down to one principle. And that was tzaddik be'emunoso yichya. That a tzaddik lives within what we call emunah. Now emunah is not just belief. It does mean belief. But emunah is a world view, is a Weltanschauung. We say in Shema, in Olenu, v'yadata hayom v'hashevosa elavavecha ki Hashem, so that Hashem is einod milvado, there's none else apart from Him. Yadata hayom, Yadata is intellectual knowledge. We've spoken about this many times before. V'hashevosa elavavecha, you have to return that, you have to internalize that this is Hashem's world. One of the ways that you can do that, as I say, if that's the way I approach my life, then everything that I do will change. I'm living with Hashem. Now, of course, there are 3 times a day when we daven. And I'm not, davening, of course, is a person tries to speak to Hashem. A person should feel, Silas Shalom says that he's speaking to a good friend who's interested in everything that's happening in his life, the way one would speak to a person who loves you. And that changes the way you look at everything. Hashem loves me. How do I know He loves me? Because He created me. But I have to stimulate that love. I have to turn up the gas under that. Yeah.
How do we actually internalize Hashem's love for us, especially at times when He puts us through difficult challenges, when it seems like He's just trying to hurt us?
Well, I told the story last week. I think I told it last week, so I'll repeat it for your benefit. There's a story about a young child who was playing in the street, and he was a very naughty boy, and the ball bounced out into the middle of this busy road, and this huge truck screeches to a halt about 2 inches from this little boy, and the truck driver hoots, puts his hand down on the horn, and he gives him rolls down the window and screams at him. 5 minutes later, the same thing happens. 10 minutes later, the same thing happens, but the third truck driver doesn't roll down the window. He jumps out of the cab. He chases this little boy all over everything, up a hill, down dale, up buildings, over rubbish sites. He finally gets this little boy, and he thrashes the living daylights out of this little boy. The third driver was his father. One of the things we can talk about on Rosh Hashanah is the fact that Hashem, the Vilna Gaon said this last week as well, at the time of the Tikkias of the shofar would stand there beaming with joy. Din, Hashem is judging me. But the fact that Hashem is judging me means, and the whole world, that He's only judging this whole world because of me. Person has to realize that has to believe that Hashem, everything that Hashem does is for my good. Why would He have created me if He doesn't love me? There can be no greater love than to create somebody. If Hashem created me, He wants to have a relationship with me. That means He loves me. And therefore, because I know He loves me, so the natural feeling is that I want to love Him back. I want to make Him happy. My Rebbe once told me, sometimes in the yeshivas they have problems with the boys. And he said all the good boys, the one thing when he would call them into his office, the one thing they would say is, Rebbe, please don't tell my tati. Don't tell daddy. So a person has to develop that feeling that Hashem is my tati. I want my tati I don't want to upset my tati. I want him to feel, if you listen to the way the Hasidim talk about the Rebbe gesagt, the Rebbe did this, the Rebbe did that. The more a person internalizes these feelings, the more he will walk around And as I said, we're not talking about shas tefillah. When you're davening, you're supposed to be doing this anyway, okay? I'm not saying one doesn't drift off. You know, there's an old joke, they say that this non-Jew asked this Jew why it was that Jews were so good in business. So he said, because of Shmona Esrei. He says, what Shmona Esrei? He says, it's our prayer. You know, we're the silent prayer. So this non-Jew says, oh, you mean you have such success because you pray to God? He says, no, because, you know, we get lots of time to think about business. Okay, it's a joke. But the fact of the matter is everybody knows how difficult it is to daven, how easy it is to drift off, how much we drift off. You know, my Rebbe once told me, he said, of course, he's a mashgiach, he stands up at the front. He said, you know, if there was a television screen at the back of his head where people could see what he was thinking about during davening, everybody has this problem. But anybody who's ever davened well, really well, even once in his life, knows what it means to daven. Chafetz Chaim, they tell a story about the Chafetz Chaim that you know, this. Somebody said to him, I don't understand. You know, why do I daven every day? Most of the time, I'm not concentrating. Most of the time, the tefillah is by rote. He said, he gave him a mashal. He said, you know, back in the old days, there was no such thing as a watch store to get your watch repaired, your clock repaired. What would happen is there would be this traveling watch repairer would go around all the towns. He'd probably come once every 2 years. Every 2 years he'd turn up and all the people in towns who had the broken clocks and watches would line up. And he'd sit down and they'd hand me, he said, this one I can fix, this one I can fix, this one I can't fix, this one I can't fix, this one I can fix. And he'd go through all the watches. So somebody said, what's the difference between the ones you can and the ones you can't? You see, when you see this watch, he picked up one that he couldn't fix. He says they picked up one that he could fix. And he said, look, this watch, even though it's broken, but the owner used to wind it up from time to time. So the mechanism didn't get jammed. This guy, the watch broke and he left it. It's completely rusted over. He says the same thing with tefillah. Even though a person may not be able to concentrate in his davening, but the mere fact that he davens, it's like winding up a broken watch. And when the watch repairer comes around, and when that inspiration strikes you, and you'll be able to, the mechanism will still be there. But apart from those times where we speak to Hashem in tefillah, one of the avodot, the suggestions I would make to you to try and make this time of the year a meaningful time, to try and inculcate this feeling that I'm trying to tell you about, that I'm living in Hashem's world. And I want to be close to Him, because He wants to be close to me, is to take some time, maybe let's say 10 times a day, or you start off with 5 times a day, and just think to yourself, I'm living in Hashem's world, or Hashem loves me. And what I did was, and I'm happy to give these out if you like, I have some fridge stickers as well. I made a little card for myself. And it says as follows: I want to be close to Hashem because He made the world and He made me too. And He wants to be close to me, and so I want to be close to Him too. Now, it sounds pretty trite, but I promise you, if you do this, if you pull this card out 5-6 times a day, and you read this and you think to yourself, you think, I'm living in Hashem's world, it'll change your entire life. So I'll leave these here. Afterwards, you can pick one up. You can take 2 or 3, as many as you like. If you're married and you have a fridge, or if you're not married and you have a fridge, you can take a fridge sticker as well. Okay, so the thing is that at once, as I said before, when a person davens once, he takes that with him. Davens once well. If a person feels this feeling even once in his lifetime, he's a different person. He's a different person. Even though he doesn't feel that all the time, he thinks to himself, at one point, I remember I thought like that. I used to feel like that. And even though he may not feel it right then at that moment in time, the feeling that he knows he's been there and he could be there again. And again, as I say, a lot of the time we feel very distant. But if we remember those times we were close to Hashem, that will change the way we go through Elul. Yeah.
You know, with something like prayer, tefillin, and these moments of feeling disconnected, how does someone push through without feeling, you know, like they're following dogma, or they're just doing something because they were told to do it?
Okay, so that's what I'm saying, that doing things by rote, even though it's generally looked down upon, there's no doubt that it works. You ask any musician, you ask anybody, any sportsman, that do they want to get up and play tennis every day of their life? Do they want to get up and go to the gym every day of their life? No. But you have to flex your spiritual muscles just like you have to flex your physical muscles. And even though you may be doing it by rote, you may be thinking to yourself, yeah, I want to be close to Hashem because He made the world. And even if but the mere fact that you're just putting yourself in that space creates something which eventually, when the inspiration strikes, it will be there. The sense of awareness that I'm not living in my world, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. I am living in Hashem's world. This is Hashem's world. And I'm in this world. And He created me. And the only reason He created me is because He cares about me. He wants me to be. And that should make a person feel very, very happy. Because when he thinks Hashem only created me because He wants me to be, that means He cares about me. He loves me. He's got my back, as they say in America. He wants me to succeed. He's egging me on. Hashem loves me. He loves me. He wants me to succeed. So when a person has that feeling, so automatically he feels, you know something, I want to make Hashem happy. I want to reciprocate. Of course, we're talking like in human terms, but that's okay, you know. I think the Chafetz Yaivit says that those foolish women who believe that they're talking to an old man sitting on a chair are greater ma'aminim than all the philosophers. Sometimes it's very good to make Hashem kaviyachol small, because sometimes when things get too intellectual and too abstract, they cease to really have any way of motivating a person. So a person should think, there's a Hashem in the world. He created this world. He created me. Why would He create me? He must love me. Hashem created all this beautiful world, and I can see and I can feel and I can think, and it's just amazing. And you know something, I want to show my appreciation. What does He ask me to do? Very little compared with the gifts that He's given me. And that's only in this world. I mean, let's face it, even if there was no Olam Haba, Chas v'Chalila, it's a pretty good deal. Life is pretty good. All right, you'll say, yeah, but it can be pretty horrible. But it can also be really wonderful. Life can be really wonderful. And about you, my life, yeah.
You know, within this conversation of appreciating God, connecting with God, do you separate religion and spirituality? Because when you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, someone could feel so connected to God, want to make God feel happy by being a good person, and trying not to, I guess, be unethical. But then they might see, like, oh, if I do tefillin, that has no bearing on my connection with God.
Yeah, but you see, we believe that God spoke to the Jewish people, and He told us what, so to speak, makes Him happy, what He wants from us. So if I believe there's a God, and I believe that God created the world for a purpose, and He created me to be close to Him, then it's logical that He gave me the means to do that. So I have no problem in seeing a difference between what you would call spirituality, which is being a good person, and putting on tefillin. Hashem, of course, it makes me feel good to be a good person. And unfortunately nowadays, a lot of religion has become feel good. And again, I'm not saying that that's wrong. And the nature of a person is that he wants to do what's right because he's created B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. The Jewish people have been given this extra, so to speak, role, which is to be a kingdom of priests, Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kodesh, a holy people. And that's our job. And He gave us the tools by which we can do that and become closer to Him than anybody else in this world can become. Of course, I'm not saying the person can't convert and become Jewish. The mitzvahs are no more than ways for us to become close to God, so to speak, to show our desire to be close to Him. Does that answer your question?
Interesting.
Maybe we should say the questions.
Yeah. So I'll say over the question afterwards then. The question was, is there a difference between spirituality and religion? Meaning everybody understands spirituality in terms of being nice to people, and but when it comes to things which are mitzvahs, like putting on tefillin, where we don't necessarily see or feel the spiritual, is it possible to be spiritual without doing the so-called, how do you say, the rituals? I don't like the word ritual because it's not. There are no rituals in Judaism. There are mitzvahs. So my answer was that every mitzvah is a form of spirituality, and even though we may not feel it, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I put on tefillin in the morning, I certainly don't. I'm not suffused with this sort of supernal spiritual glow, and I don't think anybody is. But that's but I understand intellectually that I'm doing something right. This is actually a deeper subject which we discussed, and we'll, B'ezrat Hashem, discuss again, about the idea of schar mitzvah. Chazal teaches the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah, which on the simplest level could it be understood to say when a person does a mitzvah, he gets the opportunity to do another mitzvah. Schar mitzvah. The reward of the mitzvah is a mitzvah. On a deeper level, what it means is the reward for the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. To cut a whole shir down into just a couple of lines, people tend to think that this world and the world to come are two completely separate things. Even though it says Hayom la'asosom, today to do the mitzvahs, u'macha u'lamacha, and tomorrow lekabel scharam, and tomorrow to receive their reward. Essentially, olam hazeh, this world, and the world to come are really identical. Really, the world to come is a replay of this world on a higher, more revealed level. Meaning, every mitzvah that a person puts on tefillin, he has no sense of that tefillin, of what he's doing. It's hidden from him. But in the world to come, that same action it'll be a replay. But he will understand, he will experience the incredible pleasure and spirituality of that action. And the Rambam says that's why, in point of fact, if you think about it, the corollary of Olam Hazeh, this world, should be what? Not Olam Haba, should be Olam Hahu. If you know anything about grammar, Olam Hazeh, Olam Hahu, this world, that world. So says the Rambam, no, this is Olam Haba. It's a world that comes directly as a result of the things we do in this world. Meaning, the schar mitzvah is to experience that physical, that dry, seemingly lifeless action of putting on tefillin, and to experience it on the completely in its reality as it really is.
Are there any tzaddikim who feel that ecstasy when putting on their tefillin?
I don't know. I'm not one of them, but I mean, B'ezrat Hashem, I don't know. I think, I don't know. I think intellectually, the more a person understands the mitzvahs, or the more he's medayik, he's careful to do the mitzvah, he has more pleasure out of it. I can't tell you if that pleasure is a deepening of the intellectual pleasure, or it is it could be that it is some kind of distant whisper. For example, the Chazal teaches there are several things which are an echo of Olam Haba. For example, Shabbos is 60th of Olam, is Echad Mishishim of Olam Haba. Is 1 to 59. So 1 to 59 is the threshold of taste. Shabbos is the threshold of the experience, one of the things which are the thresholds of Olam Haba. So, yeah, it is, I guess, possible in some very distant way, on the mamish, on the cusp of experience, to experience something. Could be then that somebody who is on a very high level will feel that when putting on tefillin. But it's available for everybody when it comes to Shabbos. Shabbos is a matana tova, and that's one of the reasons it's a good gift. So Chazal asks, how can any gift be a what does it mean a good gift? Any good gift is a gift, is good. The answer is that Shabbos has a special quality to it, that it allows us a peek into Olam Haba. That's why we talk about Panei Shabbat. The panim, the face, is a revelation of the interior of a person. So the face of Shabbos, so to speak, means that we can take a peek inside the essence of that relationship that we have on Shabbos with Hashem. Okay, that's basically what I wanted to go through, to talk about tonight. I suggest you do this. I suggest you keep count as how many times you brought this into your mind. Again, I'm living in Hashem's world. It's not my world. Hashem created this world, and He gave me life, and He gave me consciousness. And I'm aware that I'm alive. And I'm aware that I've been given an enormous gift, the gift of sentience, of knowledge, of being able to understand. And if He created me, it must be for a reason. I don't believe He's playing dirty pool, just created me to make my life miserable. He created me to do good things to me in this world and more in the next. And because He loves me, so I want to reciprocate. Kamayim panim lepanim, as one face to another, like a reflection in the water. Hashem should bless us that in these days coming up to Rosh Hashanah, where we all stand in din, but when we stand on Rosh Hashanah, we'll have had some time connecting and spending time, so to speak, with Hashem Yisbarach Shemo.